Transformers Fall of Cybertron is the sequel for Transformers War of Cybertron, picking up where the first game left off. For those of you who had the pleasure of playing War for Cybertron, the game left us with an ending which almost left us at the start of the G1 Transformers TV show, which aired in 1984. Noticing that there was a slight gap which could be filled, High Moon Studios got back to it and continued the story. Instantly, from the moment you load the game, you can see the shift in the mood of the game with a musical number which to me feels very inspired by the Bayformers universe. More specifically, Transformers Prime, a series which made its debut in 2010, mirroring a familiar musical scene with its own flavours running through it, giving returning players a sense of what is to come. I mean, come on, just listen to that epic score. You know you're in for a treat when the menu music alone is pumping you up. As you navigate through the menus, you can notice an immediate change in terms of campaign structure. With Fall of Cybertron, you no longer have the flexibility of choosing your character through the levels, and must control the Cybertronian given to you by the game. Personally, I find this is a welcome change. As you play through the game, the story component is a lot more relatable to the character you are playing, and also gives the player a sense of where the selected Cybertronian sits within their faction hierarchy, and the allotted strength that they bring to the table, showcasing their role in the greater Transformers universe. The game starts with the Autobot ship known as the Ark leaving Cybertronian space as the heroic Autobots abandoned their home planet in search for a new home. Unknowingly, they are in pursuit from the Decepticons in their flagship, Nemesis. Opening with a bang, the Ark is under attack, and the bridge of the Ark has taken a hit, knocking Bumblebee down. But not out. From here the game starts to configure player movement options and offers a tutorial on how to play the game, without sacrificing any of the story-based action while it's unfolding all around you, creating a sense of urgency and providing motive to push through the tutorial level, without making it feel like a boring tutorial level at all.
It's fabulous work. This is oh, bravo!
As the Decepticons wreak havoc on the Ark, you are tasked with fending off the assault and getting the Ark operational in order to make a jump through a portal in space. We'll get to how the portal appears later on in the story. Added gameplay features with Fall of Cybertron offer some very minor stealth mechanics from the first game. Where stealth was non-existent, Fall of Cybertron allows you to get the drop on unsuspecting enemies and performing an execution maneuver, which honestly looks pretty cool, and the execution maneuver changes from character to character as you progress through the game. Fall of Cybertron also has updated animations on weapons and weapon cycling through the game, removing the blue digital overlay and offering all the details of the weapon coming into its form. In addition to this, the player can now swap which arm the weapon is mounted on the fly mid-combat, to better get some of those harder to hit enemies without sacrificing your position, opening the player up to an onslaught of damage. Now if you're a Transformers fan, you know what I did there.
Who are you? And what are we doing in these crude carcasses?
Weapons and abilities in Fall of Cybertron are now customizable to a degree. As you make your way through the game, you will turn enemies into scrap, which will in turn drop what is called shards, as opposed to the predecessor game dropping energon. Shards can be spent at Teletran 1 stations, which are basically stores to upgrade weapons which the character can equip, which are visibly noticeable on the character. You will see the enhancements on the character's body or arm as the equipment is upgraded, which is such a refreshing touch. But there is a downside to this. The upgrades are only relevant to the character who purchased them. So if I took Bumblebee and upgraded his starter weapon, those upgrades won't translate over to other characters as you play through the game. Which is kind of wasteful, but at the same time kind of makes sense, as weapons when equipped morph into the Cybertronian body. The store can also upgrade other aspects such as additional health, improved running speed, health regeneration rate, and other aspects which do apply to every character as you transition through the campaign. So to me it makes sense to focus on these first and foremost to give the player a continuous advantage through the game.
Once in my life I would like the upper hand. I have no hand at all!
Fall of Cybertron has done away with the previous health system and have changed this to a rechargeable shield which will recharge when able to avoid incoming fire for a period of time. Once it's gone, then you will start losing health points. Again, to recharge, you will need to find energon cubes which are located on maps and occasionally drop from enemy variants while you play. All the character models have been overhauled in Fall for Cybertron, making them similar but also noticeably different to War for Cybertron. the most noticeable being Optimus Prime. For the first game, Optimus assumed command of the Autobots after the death of Zeta Prime, and through the campaign of War for Cybertron, you could tell he is a character who is trying to live up to an example, whereas in Fall of Cybertron, Optimus's character, through way of interaction with other characters, really feels like he has come into his own at the helm of the Autobot resistance. The game also adds a new list of cast, introducing Warpath, Perceptor, and Cliffjumper, and pays a lot of homage to the source material which the game was built upon. Noticeably as such, when Optimus interacts with Teletran 1 for the first time, Teletran calls him by his original name.
Greetings, Orion Pax, Optimus Prime.
Adding in snippets like this is great for those who are devout fans of Transformers history, and it just makes the experience that much better and a lot more immersive to play. Playing as Optimus early on in the game, this is set 6 days prior to the events which took place on the opening game tutorial level. This is where the game truly begins. As you progress through the levels instantly, you can feel the shift in player controls, as Optimus just feels heavier in terms of navigation and level traversal. What Optimus does have now is a sprint ability, which will see him unequip his weapon and burst into a sprint, very similar to what Gears of War introduced with the Roadie Run. As you progress through the level of Optimus, you get to meet Warpath and Perceptor, as you look to defend the Ark from an incoming assault by the Decepticons. During this level, Transformers fans will notice a familiar sight off in the distance. And if you're not a Transformers fan, you're in for a treat.
It's targeting the Ark.
You will find and awaken the Titan Autobot known as Metroplex, who is essentially a city. You get to designate targets for Metroplex and ensure the Ark is safe, and Metroplex will quite happily go lay the smackdown on every damn thing in his way, which feels like you're getting the upper hand after what you had to do to get to him, making your way through legions of Decepticons and their tanks trying to mow you down every 5 feet of gameplay. Ultimately, Optimus will end up getting caught and taken for an audience with Megatron. That is until Metroplex has something to say about it. From the Decepticon camp, Starscream will be Starscream and ultimately declares himself as the new head of the Decepticon Empire, but in typical fashion, backs out of a fight when faced with the likes of one Optimus Prime. Starscream as a leader is as about inspiring as the design choices made for Devastator and Revenge of the Fallen, which ultimately leads to a bit of a rift in the Decepticons, which will end up growing as you progress through the game, which brings us to the addition of some new faces within the Decepticon camp, most notable being the Insecticons, Shockwave, and the Combaticons. The leader of the Combaticons is Onslaught. He is seen butting heads with Starscream the most through the story. You get to experience players Vortex and Onslaught in an attempt to stop the Autobots from taking a large supply of Energon to evacuate Cybertron. For those who aren't aware, the Combaticons are combiners, and when all 5 of them combine, they make Bruticus, which is a playable character in the game. As you make your assault on the Autobots, you really get a sense of the size and destruction you can cause playing this powerhouse, who is sporting a whopping 1,000 health points as opposed to the standard 100. And while you don't have any form of weapon, you do have your fists, which are more than enough to punch everything in your way into oblivion, and the option of blocking using the rotors of Vortex's helicopter-inspired Bolt form. Progressing through the story, we are led to Soundwave, who is secretly working on a bit of a side project under Starscream's reign. And after a little bit, it soon becomes clear that our favourite tyrant is risen again. All hail Megatron! In an all-new and improved body, which allows us to see the difference in character model from the previous game, making Megatron himself look a lot more intimidating as a playable character. Noticeably, we see Megatron interrupting Starscream's coronation ceremony. This seems vaguely familiar.
Starscream, this is bad comedy.
Megatron, who disrupts my coronation?
Coronation, Starscream? This is bad comedy.
Megatron? Is that you?
Being a tyrant the only way Megatron knows how, you get to make short work of Starscream's loyalists and retake the reins as the Decepticon leader, while Starscream quickly exits the scene in fear for his life, and rightfully so. Here is another excellent example of the game playing tribute to the source material which came before it, by quoting lines from the 1986 movie. Which, if you're a Transformers fan and you haven't seen this movie, just stop right here and go watch it. It's okay. I'll wait. Fall of Cybertron again is excellent at showcasing just how cold and ruthless Megatron is when coming to achieving an objective. Knowing that the Decepticons are now in disarray and need to get back on track fast, Megatron resumes his hunt to stop the Autobots, and through discussion with Shockwave and Soundwave has learned of Shockwave's experiments in the Sea of Rust, in which Shockwave has been able to open a portal into space to a primitive planet rich in resources in which to plunder. In his dealing with his Decepticon scientists, Megatron learns that Trypticon is still functional and his power core still active. As such, Megatron sets a plan in motion to retrieve and repurpose Trypticon into the ship we all know and love, the Nemesis. Now, while this isn't originally the case in the G1 continuation of Transformers, it is a nice little tie-in to the War of Cybertron and a bit of a nod back to where it all began. The game then follows up with what happened to old mate Starscream, who got out of Dodge. It seems he has unfinished business with Megatron and is holding a bit of a grudge for his embarrassing dismissal as leader of the Decepticons. Looking for some payback, Starscream makes his way into Shockwave's laboratories, thinking that he'll acquire his own army. Knowing that Shockwave has been working on a type of super soldier. And then we come face to face with the mighty Grimlock, who is arguably one of the single strongest Transformers ever. Starscream thinks that if he frees Grimlock, he can convince him to work alongside him to exact his revenge. Grimlock tosses Starscream aside and rampages his way through the facility which he has been held captive in search of his teammates, which you will find as you progress throughout the levels. Grimlock boasts a whopping 500 health points. Now, just for some perspective on that, Bruticus has 1000 health points, and that was with 5 Combaticons forming into one bot. Grimlock, on his own, is half of that. Now, if that doesn't scream to the levels of power you now have control of, then his attacks certainly will. Grimlock cannot pick up a typical weapon, but does come equipped with a sword, which literally cuts through Decepticons like a hot knife through butter. Now, with Grimlock, you cannot change at will. Anyone who knows Grimlock knows he isn't the sharpest tool in the shed, and the game does an amazing job at explaining why, and this is due to Shockwave's experiments. What Grimlock does have is a rage meter. Instead of picking up shards like you would as currency with all other characters, Grimlock collects fury. Once his fury is full, this allows him to enter his ult mode of the mechanical T-Rex. And with this, you can breathe fire, bite, stop, and tail whip everything out of your way with ease. The frustrating thing here is that there is a timer on this transformation, and when that timer runs out, you will be forced to revert back into your bot form, which really isn't disappointing at all, because you can literally see Decepticons curling up in a little ball hoping that the bad man will go away. This leads Grimlock on to seeking outright revenge on Shockwave for making him a guinea pig, as he hunts down and shows Shockwave what time it is. This is clearly Shockwave being too good at what he does, and it came back to bite him. Literally. This leads into Grimlock shutting down the spire which is creating the space portal, putting a very short timer on the ability to evacuate Cybertron. The Autobots know that there isn't enough power to get the ship off the ground, and it's one last gift from Metroplex, who sacrifices himself to power the ship for the rest of the Autobots to escape. Now this is the grand crescendo, swinging from Autobot and Decepticons all in one simultaneous level, which will begin with Megatron in pursuit of the Ark. Enter Soundwave, leading the boarding party. Now Soundwave as a playable character isn't the toughest, but what he doesn't have in strength or speed, he makes up with his minions, with the ability to deploy Rumble and Laser Beak at will as you play to deal with enemies in your path and to achieve the objective of shutting down the Ark defense systems. Once achieved, from here tow cables are launched from the Nemesis and Decepticons are wreaking havoc all over the Ark. Jetfire is quickly summoned to dispatch the tow cables and free the Ark from the clutches of the Nemesis. This is done by shooting out the tow cable's armor plating to expose weak points and then blow them out to detach each cable.
Any more Decepticons, Crunch?
Then, in comes a preformed Bruticus to keep the fight going for the Decepticons, rampaging on the surface of the Ark, mashing through everything until you get to the Ark's power source to shut down the ship totally. And now we have come full circle, back to the start of the video, where the tutorial ended, Megatron versus Optimus, and the fight gives you the opportunity to choose your allegiance, Megatron or Optimus. Ultimately it's the player's choice. Megatron in his unyielding resolve, and Optimus has come to the realization that Megatron can't be reasoned with, so he needs to be put down. The fight is primarily using melee weapons, and it's a fight to the death. The game ultimately ends with neither party dying as Optimus, Megatron, and both ships are dragged through the portals. An epic conclusion to one of the most, if not the best Transformers game of all time. Now, it's not often that a sequel is better than the game that came first, but Transformers Fall of Cybertron exceeded all my expectations on all fronts. And while I can admit that it's not 100% accurate to Generation 1, I can't help but get caught up by the story and the universe that has been created for these games. Looking to the horizon, we have Transformers Rise of the Beasts. Further still, there is a new game on the horizon, Transformers Reactivate. Now, not much is known about the game so far, but the trailer has me excited for the future and what's coming. Are you excited for the upcoming movie? Are you excited for the upcoming game? Do you think this is something you might want to check out? And the most important question of all, which faction are you on? Until next time, friends.